A lot of you I know Anita Riggs, but for those of you who don't, I will tell you that she is the founder and clinical director of the Healing House, which has been providing counseling services to Central Florida for almost 20 years. We are very, very lucky to have her here to talk to us with all that's going on in the world today. And without further ado, I will turn this over to Anita.
Thank you.
It's all yours, Anita.
Thank you. And so I will start this evening first by thanking you for inviting me to share thoughts and feelings and observations this evening. I am new to your organization, but not new to the many members, the very dear, beautiful people that I see on the screen right now. And it's my honor and my privilege to share my thoughts this evening. About a week ago, I guess, this invitation came to me, and at first, in the insanity of the pace that I'm keeping, my inclination was to say no, because I'm trying to be very, very good with my boundaries and treat this as the marathon that it is in terms of the pace I'm keeping. But when I took a moment to consider how I can reach more people and how I can share ideas and thoughts that might be helpful, I couldn't say no. And so I thank you for allowing me to be here. I will qualify also that I'm very uncomfortable with technology. It's not my forte. This psychologically minded being that sits here is very much an energy person. And I've done many, many public speaking events over the years, but never to a computer. And so this feels very strange to me. And I know we're all navigating lots of new normals right now. And this is a first normal for me, of many, I'm sure, in the future. So I will do the very best I can to navigate the distractions on the screen and pretend that I'm talking to you in person, so that flows a little bit smoother. So needless to say, we all know that this is an unprecedented time in our country, in our world, and it is profound in terms of feelings and reactions and experiences for everyone we know, and certainly people we don't know that are once removed. And so as I kind of put together my thoughts for this evening, I could talk for hours on the subject, but I tried to condense content that I believe would be helpful. So feel free to interrupt with questions and or save them for the end, but also take what's useful and certainly discard what doesn't serve you in terms of thoughts, because I am hardly an expert on this subject. I don't know anyone that has any prior experience with something of this magnitude. And I've found myself kind of digging deep with all of my clinical experience over the years in different settings, both as a nurse, having run a hospital previously, my experience in counseling with my private practice and the many beautiful clients that I learn from every day, but also just what we're presently seeing here at the Healing House in terms of the collective response and kind of unrest amongst us. And so as I kind of walk around my world right now, I believe that the energy, the angst, the anxiety, the depression is palpable in our culture right now, in our society. And so the first thing that I want to comment on is to normalize the emotions that all of us are feeling. You know, there's a whole host of emotions for any of us on any given day, but right now, I think that is a constantly moving target, a constantly changing feeling state for each of us, depending upon who in our immediate orbit is impacted, and then kind of the collective conscious of the world right now. Yesterday, I watched the performance of Bocelli performing in Italy, and I used to live in Italy long, long ago. And at very odd times, I find myself really overcome with emotion. You know, this is our norm, this is our reality right now that we all face every day. But when I saw the empty streets of Italy, and I saw him performing solo in that beautiful Duomo that I have visited many times before, I was overcome with grief and sadness at what has become of that country. I have dear friends who still live there, and I keep in constant contact with them, learning from them about their experience, wanting to support them. I also have a very dear brother of mine who is a chief medical officer at a large hospital in New York City. And so needless to say, I have some palpable anxiety about his safety and well-being with what's going on in other parts of our country that are identified as hotspots and a lot more grave conditions conditions than what we're experiencing here in Florida. But as I often say, you know, pain as well as feelings are relative to the person who's in it, and the only useful comparison is really you to you, not to anyone else that you're walking in life with. And one of my very common expressions that those of you who know me know I say is that feelings are not right and they're not wrong, they're not good and they're not bad, they simply are. And it's learning how to react to those feelings and how to navigate those feelings that becomes the challenge for all of us. And I think, you know, normally speaking, we may experience ourselves as more stable with our feeling state, but right now, depending upon the prompts that you're receiving in a given day, whether that's media prompts or government prompts or friend prompts in terms of data and information that we're processing and digesting, which by the way is ever changing, it absolutely has a direct impact on our mood. And I often will remark that feelings are like the clouds in the sky. They're ever changing and they're equal and simultaneous and they're oppositional. And there could be big, puffy, beautiful clouds and dark, stormy clouds all in the same sky. And that's kind of a good symbolism of what we might be experiencing in our everyday right now. I know for me personally, I am trying to live in the solution all day, every day. I'm trying to find the good and the positive and see the goodness in people and things and experiences. I certainly am not a homebody. I'm not a person that enjoys sitting around doing nothing, for those of you who know me. And it has been quite a learning experience for me to be still. I think as a culture, we are conditioned to some degree, to a large degree, to be human doings and to go and do. And so having restrictions imposed upon us, it's one thing if you choose to be on vacation and lay on a beach and do nothing. It's another thing to have restrictions imposed that we didn't necessarily choose. And while our intellectual self knows that these are good and necessary restrictions, our emotions don't always catch up. They often lag behind in terms of what our actual daily experience is. So when I think about the different things that I'm learning, there's a lot of reactions and feelings that I'm hearing in a universal way right now from different people that I engage with and process each day. And I would say that the number one reaction that I hear over and over again is the lack of control when it comes to the uncertainty of this experience. And I think as individuals, as a rule, we do best if something is time limited and defined. Everybody does well with structure, with knowing what to expect. You know, we get job descriptions when we start a new job, when we send our kids off to school or whatever other experience, there's usually some kind of directive or orientation for how to do stuff or what to expect or encounter. And right now, all of this is unexpected to us. The timing of such, the things that we're being asked to do or not do, it's all unexpected, but it's also such that I maintain that as individuals, we can do anything if it's time limited. We can get our minds around that, our goals set to be in a solution-oriented way when it comes to, all right, you tell me that I have to do this for 3 weeks, I can do it. But it's that moving target and the uncertainty about how long are we doing this and what to expect, and the unknown leaves people at a loss, but also really exacerbates anxiety. And what I'm experiencing is even people who don't have a tendency toward anxiety as a rule or as a general personality are experiencing anxiety. And I guess the first and foremost point I want to make is that anxiety is a normal reaction to what's going on right now for all of us. I don't think anybody gets immunity on that. It's a reaction to loss or anticipated loss. It's a reaction to fear that is perfectly appropriate. Where it becomes problematic is when it crosses over to interfering with daily living or daily functioning. Then it becomes something we think about treating, but you're supposed to feel anxious right now, and you're supposed to feel sad, and you're supposed to feel stressed if there's such a thing as supposed to on emotions. But those would be expected responses and actually normal responses to what we're experiencing. And so I want to start by offering that permission that if you're feeling those feelings in and out and often throughout the day, that's exactly the right response to this current dilemma that we face, this current crisis that we face. when I say it becomes problematic if it interferes with daily living, the other place with which that really manifests as significant is with sleep. And I think we all know that sleep is a good medicine and a necessary medicine. It's vital for functioning. It's vital for managing our physical well-being. And many, many people are reporting difficulty with sleep, even those individuals who have not previously had struggles with sleep. I know I have a very overactive mind. I have my whole life since I was a little girl, and I have no trouble falling asleep at night because I'm completely exhausted by the end of the day, but I'm up between 2 and 3 every night, and my mind is going a million miles a minute, contemplating the many things that I heard and processed during the previous day, and also anticipating things that I could be doing, should be doing, might be doing, not only to help out, but also to keep my beloved nearest and dearest safe. And so sleep escapes me a lot these days, as it does for many, many people I encounter. So I want to talk about some practical things that we all can be doing. And it starts for me with waking up every day with a dose of gratitude. And I try to do that as a rule on good times as well as bad times. But the first thing that I do when I wake up is reach over and grab my cell phone, not to look at the news, because that's a very bad way to start my day. But to make sure that no one I know and love has contacted me with a problem during the night. I turn my ringer off at night so I can get some semblance of sleep going on. And the first thing I check off my list is no one I know and love today is seriously ill. And I start with that as my dose of gratitude. And frankly, that's a good day because it's already started that way. The next part is to try to invite a feeling state that is positive, and with good energy, because we all know that when we open our eyes and face the day, we are also awake enough to know and be acutely aware of the realities that our world is facing right now. And never have I experienced a time with which everyone is impacted. No one gets to escape or gets immunity, so to speak, excuse the pun, on the financial and the spiritual and the emotional and the social impact that this crisis has. And if we're lucky enough to not have the physical disease, we cannot avoid all of the other impacts that are happening for everyone that we know and love. And so I start out with that kind of reframe in the morning in terms of, at least I'm healthy today, and the people I know and love that are nearest and dearest to me are healthy today. And if they're not, I will immediately get in the solution in terms of what to do to help that individual. Because the other piece I remind myself of when I first wake up is, what do I have control over today? And what are the things that I can do to positively impact the people I love? And what are the things that I can do to make a difference? Because I am a person that does better when I live in the solution. I'm a person, when I get into action, I feel better, because there's so many variables right now that are outside of our control that we're powerless over. And I think as creatures, we some better than others, but a lot of us don't respond well to powerlessness. And the notion, the feeling that we don't get to control outcomes. That would be true for many, many things, but particularly right now, I think we all get to face concepts and dilemmas that we haven't previously had to consider on a regular basis. And for me, it starts with, unless we've had a serious illness or people we love have had a serious illness, most of us don't have on the forefront of our mind becoming seriously ill and or our own mortality. And so I think it's fair and reasonable to acknowledge that we're all having to kind of take a look at that. And, am I a person that gets to kind of escape this unscathed and not be sick? And certainly the people that are closest to me. So, we start with, am I going to get sick? What's going to happen to my world? What's going to happen to the people I love? What's going to happen to the people I take care of? And vice versa for those that love us. But then the next part of that equation is accepting and kind of surrendering and letting go and really kind of challenging myself with, okay, what do I have control over today? I have control over taking good care of my own health. And one of the things that I do to combat anxiety is to make sure that I'm really vigilant about my own self-care. The classic expression that we're all familiar with is, when you get on a plane, you put the mask on your own face before the people you're traveling with. And I think that expression that we're all familiar with, it couldn't be more true right now. in a literal sense of putting on the mask when we're out and about in public, but also in terms of if I keep my stamina up and I keep my self-care up and I keep my immunity high, even if I'm unlucky enough to get exposed to the virus, I'm controlling the conditions that I can control about my immune system having an appropriate response to a virus that can be lethal. And so managing our stress, and I know that that seems paradoxical right now and counterintuitive, but managing our stress is the one piece we have control over right now, in terms of keeping ourselves in a way of not being host to a virus. Some of you who know me personally know that I have experienced a major challenge in my own life with a daughter of mine who has a serious illness. I won't say that she's seriously ill right now, but we have suffered for the last 9 years with autoimmune disorder with her that is characterized by her body and her immune system being host to a multitude of viruses, most of which are untreatable. And she has suffered relapse and remission and the worst form of human suffering, which is neurosensitivity that requires her to be in isolation, sensitive to light, sound, and touch. And so as I've kind of reflected on what's going on in our world right now, I'm pulling from that game book, that skill set that I used throughout the course of her illness, because we literally traveled the world and traveled all over the country trying to find cures and ways with which to help her deal with her illness. I've learned a lot over the last 9 years, you know, pulling on my background as a nurse, pulling on the many gifted healers that I've been lucky enough to encounter. And the one piece that we had control over during the course of her illness, when so many people didn't know what to do to help her, was strengthening the host. And so I am inviting you to look at yourselves as hosts right now, and keep yourselves very strong. Now, how do you keep yourself strong? Sleep is number one and foremost in terms of keeping strength. Eating properly and avoiding things like sugar and white flour. Another way to keep yourself very strong. One of the things that we learned in her illness was that those organisms, those viruses and bacteria that lived in her, and at one point she had 9 different viruses simultaneously. She was on the infectious disease ward at Florida Hospital, and she had a list of 9 of those. And you know, you would look at her and your head would spin at all the different diagnoses. And all we could really do is strengthen her so that she was not host to the organisms that we did not wish to be there. And I use that comparison simply because I had to learn how to navigate the unknowns in that experience with her, and absolutely refuse to take no for an answer. And that's kind of how I look at this virus right now. It has the ability to literally be paralyzing to people. And our responses to it vary from person to person based on our personalities. And I've seen a lot of polar opposites in terms of responses these last couple of weeks. Some people under stressful conditions go into overdrive. Other people get paralyzed. Some people get into overdoing. Other people get into kind of numbing out and avoiding and maybe even minimizing what we're learning and what we're experiencing every day. And then I see a lot of infighting that goes on with families and or couples based on how they're responding or not responding, or how we think they should respond or not. And I really want to offer the insight that everybody is allowed to process at their own rate and speed. And we all digest in different bites. Some people process very quickly. Some people process with a lot of thoughtful consideration, and want to encourage you to not make others wrong for the way with which they're digesting and processing. I had an interesting conversation with my brother when this first started, because his personality, that of a surgeon, was such to initially minimize the concerns and to suggest a less reactive response. And in listening to him share, I said to him, you know, you're a person in our family that people look up to, that all of the collective nieces and nephews go to for advice. They consider you to be brilliant, and they trust and respect your opinion. And if you think that you're being helpful right now by minimizing this, it actually has an opposite effect, and it actually invites anxiety because of the incongruence that people are reading and seeing and hearing. And so I start with reminding people to validate what it is you're feeling. It's not right, it's not wrong. You're allowed to feel whatever it is you feel. It's really important that you give it a voice, because the more you try to stuff what you're feeling, the more it holds you hostage, and the more it is such that it escalates. And so acknowledging what you're feeling with safe people and giving yourself permission that it's not right or wrong is a good starting place to kind of diffuse. And whether you're a person that likes to talk, or a person that likes to write or meditate or pray, any of those tools I encourage. I keep a little tablet next to my bed, and at 2, 3 in the morning, when my mind is going a million miles a minute, I do turn on the light, even though it's not recommended to do so. And I do not get on my phone, because when I have mistakenly done that, then I'm really up. But I will take from this head to the paper those thoughts and feelings, recognizing that in the morning when I wake up, it'll be there and I can take a look at it again. I don't need to hold on to it, and it doesn't need to interfere with getting a good night's rest. And so, coming back to steps to take to keep your own host strengthened, sleeping is first and foremost. Staying away from caffeine, staying away from sugar in the evening will likely or increase the likelihood of getting a good night's sleep. For me, I have to strike a balance with keeping informed, but also not over-informed. And so you can be your own worst enemy when it comes to exposing yourself to media and people commenting. It's hard to have a conversation these days, no matter where you go, without people bringing up the virus and COVID and all the things that are going on in a gloom and doom kind of way. And so I really limit my exposure to those types of conversations, except when I'm at work, of course, but also when I'm home, I'm letting home be a sanctuary. I'm letting home be filled with good music and watching some movies and reading some novels. I haven't had time to read novels in a very long time, but I'm back to pleasure reading because it is a fabulous distraction. I do check the news in the morning. I check it again late in the day, but never right before I go to sleep at night, because I think that those prompts are stuff that I'll either take into my dreams and or will interrupt my sleep and be information that I need to process rather than actually sleeping. And so, use what tools you need to limit your exposure, and whether that is calling a friend and qualifying when you first call, hey, can we talk about something other than the virus? Tell me something new and good. Tell me something different today. Tell me some little pleasure that you found in this day. We have to dig deep to find those things. I know for me, being in this experience right now, I find great comfort and pleasure in knowing that my children are nearby. Some people are not as fortunate to have their children nearby, and it would certainly be more stressful and more anxiety provoking for me if I didn't have close proximity to them right now, especially my daughter who's immunocompromised. And so on one hand, I'm eternally grateful that they are near, in fact, in my home right now. On other days, I find myself a little irritated that I can't walk in the kitchen without somebody always being there. I can't be in the living room without people being there. And I say it in a playful kind of way that I think a couple of weeks ago, we could all relish more frequent exposure with our loved ones, and it was all novel and fun and light and breezy and beautiful to have this extra time with everyone. What I'm seeing now is kind of as reality is setting in, as this is becoming our new norm, I'm seeing people become more irritated and less forgiving. It's normal to have people get under our skin when we spend prolonged exposure with them. And so within your household, it also is important to figure out, because everybody's on top of each other now, how do I actually miss this person? Because in the usual days, we're used to going about our day, getting up, getting ready, heading out the door, doing our thing. And now that's not happening. And so how do you create opportunities within your own house to have some downtime, some private time, some alone time for your nervous system to chill out a little bit, to not have to talk, to not have to be in a good mood if you don't feel like being in a good mood, within the same physical space that you're commingling. And I find that, people take turns, obviously, within a household, with different moods and different feelings. And one person might be in a decent mood and having a relatively good day. Someone else might be really troubled or upset or triggered. And how do do you navigate that in the same kitchen, in the same living room? It's very, very important to offer compassion and forgiveness, recognizing that we're not all at the same space at any given time. I jokingly say, especially for couples, like you can't actually miss the person when they're right there. And so can it be such that one person works in one room and the other person respectfully works in the other room, and you don't intrude upon each other? You know, some of the social graces that we haven't had to afford or offer in our households become important right now, so as not to be intrusive 24/7 on each other. And if you are irritated, kind of keeping that in check. That I use an expression that when we don't like our emotional reality, it's not uncommon to find somebody to dump that on or take it out on, even if it's not conscious. You know, the classic cliche being that if you've had a bad day at work and you come home and kick the dog, not that any of us would ever do that, that would be taking uncomfortable emotions and placing them on someone or something else. It's very important to self-monitor that if I'm not in a good way and I've not had a good day, or I'm particularly upset or triggered by what's going on in the world right now, I have to be responsible for not taking that out on anyone else. The other piece is that I think we all feel a hypervigilance about the people we love, making sure that they're okay, making sure that they're healthy, making sure that no harm comes to them, even more than ever right now. That would be true in general. But, you know, for me, it would be kind of looking at the people I love and making sure they don't seem sick, making sure that they're not coming down with anything, but also recognizing that you know, if they're not having an okay day, what is it that I can do to be helpful? And we don't need to guess about that. We don't need to mind read about that. If someone you know and love doesn't seem okay, it's okay to ask. It's okay to check in with them. In fact, I encourage you to do so instead of guessing. Now, they may say, I'm fine, and you know they're not. They may say, I'm just tired and I don't feel like talking. That's okay. It's really important to respect that boundary. You know, a common kind of couple banter would be, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. You don't seem fine. And I say that the person who says that they're fine when they're not owns that. And it's not anyone else's job to fix that. If you say you're fine and you're not, that's on you. And so part of it is kind of responsibly owning what it is you're feeling and asking for what you need, so your partner doesn't have to mind read or guess. But the other piece would be, sometimes you don't know what you need. And it's okay to not know what you need. It might be, I just need to cry. It might be, I just need to be quiet. It might mean I need a distraction and I need you to distract me with something else. You're allowed to kind of be changeable with that. And it doesn't mean you're going crazy. It doesn't mean that your feelings are unreasonable or unnatural. And so for those of you checking in with the people that you love, sometimes it's just good to hear their voice. Sometimes it's good to just kind of lay eyes on them. I think that's the beauty of Zoom for me right now, because none of my extended family lives here in Florida. And so it's been very, very nice for me to be able to talk to them by visualizing them. Not because I have to see them, and I certainly could accomplish the same on a phone call, but I like to lay my eyes on them to know that they're safe, and to know, to kind of read if I see anything different about them. So those are a few thoughts that I have. The other part is the different defense mechanisms that we use when we're under stress. And under stressful conditions, we all have our go-to defense mechanisms. You know, we'd like to suggest that we're not defensive. Defense mechanisms are vital for survival. And what I see over time is that a lot of times people revert to old, familiar, sometimes destructive patterns of coping when we're under really intense stress. You know, in the beginning, we kind of rally, we rise to the occasion, but over time, it can be unhealthy ways of coping too: eating too much, drinking too much, smoking too much, things that are maladaptive. And you know, I know for me, being the Italian that I am, I'm cooking and eating too much because it's something to do to pass the time right now. And so I have to be mindful of, if I'm going to cook, let me cook some good stuff and some healthy stuff, you know, because I have all this time to create now in the kitchen. And so, you know, rather than kind of being down on ourselves for those maladaptive or coping mechanisms, I think it's really important to become an observer of it, that if your go-to is to do something that isn't productive or could be destructive, what can you replace that with? I maintain that nature abhors a vacuum, and so do people. And so what are you going to fill this time and space with? You know, we all say, oh, I'm going to walk more, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to eat really healthy, I'm going to lose weight during this time. who knows what that is, what your goal might be. I think it's okay to do good enough right now. You know, I talk with a lot of parents who are faced with homeschooling their kids right now, and they didn't sign up to be homeschool teachers. And I think it's extraordinarily difficult to mobilize, especially if you're not a person that does technology well, especially if you're a person that is working at home, or sometimes with dual career couples, both people are charged with the task of working at home. They got to get their work done, and they also have to oversee their children doing their schoolwork. And unless you happen to have a child that's extremely self-motivated and high functioning academically, oftentimes they need supervision and they need direction, and they need a little bit of pulse keeping when it comes to their academics. And so that becomes its own kind of stress ball in households right now, with everybody needing to get their stuff done. And you know, most of us don't strive to do something half-hearted or not as good as we're capable of. But I think right now the collective stress that we're all under is such that it's okay to do good enough. And you know, that's something that I've had to repeatedly tell myself right now, that, you know, number one, what do I mostly care about? That the people I love are not sick and that they remain healthy and safe. And so if I can accomplish that today, then I've done enough today. And so, for instance, with schoolwork, if you're trying to homeschool your kids, are they getting enough done? Are they doing the best of their ability that day? You know, this concept of needing to focus on straight A's right now maybe needs to be laid aside for a minute. That you know, even the teachers and you know, school officials that are trying to mobilize these online programs, it's not going to go perfect and it's not going to go smooth. And you know, if you can kind of pick and choose and be selective with what you stress out about and what your kids stress out about, I think that's a good thing right now. Under ideal circumstances, would we always strive for the best? Yeah, and try to do the absolute level best that we can do, for sure. But these are not ideal circumstances that we're under. I think, you know, working at home is a challenge for many adults I know, where they find a zillion distractions and or things that they would prefer doing than sitting on the computer. For me, I'm not a computer type. I don't enjoy it. I do what I have to do on there. I prefer talking and engaging live. And so, you know, being on task with those kinds of things when it doesn't come easy and natural to a person, do the best you can with that. It's okay to give yourself some leeway right now, and not have to be as high achieving as you would normally be capable of. The other part of this equation would be looking to people we trust and respect for reassurance right now. And it's a normal tendency to want to go to our partner or our loved one or a parent and want them to offer comfort and reassurance right now. Recognizing, however, that they've got their own fears and worries and concerns, and depending upon how you're socialized culturally or gender-wise, there's different expectations for the different genders and different cultures. And I maintain that you can't really give what you don't possess. And it's normal for every one of us, regardless of status, to need reassurance right now. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody knows exactly what the course of this illness will be. We hear lots of conflicting information from medical experts, from government officials. It's an ever-changing, moving target you know, we keep getting different guidelines. And I think that in of itself is not only anxiety-provoking, but people tend to get angry when it's changing or when it's contradicting or when there's incongruence, where I'm seeing one thing, but I'm told something else. And so for me, that's one of the things that I had to learn in my daughter's illness, because I got tons of conflicting information. And I had a whole host of experts kind of weighing in on what needed to happen. And I finally had to just get quiet at the end of each day and really trust my instincts and my good common sense. And I would listen to the people. I had to kind of narrow it down to the people I trust and respect the most. And you know, if I started to hear kind of a common denominator theme in some of the comments that resonated with me, then I would lean toward those. It's hard to discern right now who to listen to. It's hard to, and I think when we look to our partners for reassurance, they may or may not be able to offer that at a given day or time. And instead of getting mad at them that they can't offer it, it's important to recognize that they too need to have an offering of reassurance as well. And that kind of comes back to the whole timeline being uncertain and the whole course of this viral process being uncertain. And so it forces all of us to kind of sit in discomfort. And we're not trained to sit in discomfort. It's like I joke around with parents when I say, when you're setting boundaries with your kids, the hard part is not setting the boundary, it's actually enforcing it, because we get to sit in the discomfort of them not being happy with whatever the boundary is that we placed. And we're all having to sit in discomfort of the unknown right now and learn how to be and learn how to sit with some kind of comfort in that uncertainty. You know, being is a concept that, you know, we read a lot about. We've all been invited to do mindful meditation over time. We've all had exposure to lots of beautiful reading materials. In fact, I think that your federation is having Renee Brent speak next week on mindfulness. I will absolutely try to attend that because she is a beautiful speaker and offers a lot of very helpful hints to people. A lot of people will tell me, hey, I can't meditate. I'm not the type of personality that can meditate. You know, meditation can be a meditation in motion. It doesn't have to be sitting still. I'm not a person that sits still well. I do best to meditate riding my bike or doing a yoga practice where I'm moving, because moving distracts me from what it is that I'm feeling. And so if moving is what works for you and somebody else needs complete quiet and silence, great. We don't need to make anybody wrong for how they're coping or what they require right now. So when you're looking to somebody for reassurance and they can't give it because at that particular place in time, they're not able to, have a wider support circle of people that you can call upon. I used to joke around with my girlfriends and say, it's a darn good thing that we're not all in a bad space at once, for whatever might be going on in our lives. And you know, that's the difficult part of this navigation right now, that everyone we know is affected. And if they're not affected with their business, then they're affected with their health. If they're not affected with their health, then they're affected with emotions, or they're being overtaxed because they're a critical and essential worker that's being called upon to do even more right now. And so it's really difficult to find anybody that would be unscathed at this point. And so at a particular place in time, they may or may not be able to offer you what you need. Let's not make them wrong for that. That you may not be able to offer what somebody else needs today, and that's okay too. Tomorrow, after you've had a chance to rest and kind of shore yourself up, you might be able to revisit that person and offer something useful. So those are some immediate thoughts that come to me when I think about what's going on in our world, recognizing very humbly that I am not an expert on this subject. I have no prior experience with this. I can really only draw upon life and the many people that I've been fortunate enough to brainstorm with. You know, even here at the Healing House, we have had to implement lots of processes that we didn't previously. You know, some of the things that we're implementing now, I would venture to guess that we're going to retain as good practices moving forward, because I'm not sure when we would have a green light on returning to some of the old freedoms that we used to do. Some of the stuff makes really good sense. And so we will probably retain some of the things that we've learned. I know for me, I have really tried to appreciate slowing down my pace. And I was reading a magazine last night, which I don't typically do, sitting around my house. And my daughter came through the living room and she smiled and said, "It makes me so happy to see you sitting in that chair reading." And I thought that is a really unfamiliar sight for my kids. And I'm trying to recognize that that's a very good recovery for me right now in terms of the pace that I'm keeping. And I might think, oh, I'm sitting around doing nothing, reading this magazine, but it was really, really helpful to recharge, because when I come back on Monday, I need better energy. And so whatever it is that works for you to recharge, please do more of it right now. I think it's easy to feel guilty when we feel like we're slacking or not doing the stuff that we're accustomed to doing, but really right now the situation calls for that. And so if it is catching up with friends that we don't otherwise have time for, or we're too busy, if you're relishing, you know, I've heard a lot of people say, I feel guilty for admitting that I kind of like this time right now, especially if you're on the introverted side of the continuum. You know, when we challenge or we explore, why would you feel guilty that you're enjoying it? What's good about it? What's good about it is I get to spend more time with the people I love. I get to reach out to people that I don't otherwise have time for. I don't have to get up in the morning and rush and race out the door like I'm accustomed to. I don't have to squeeze in a workout really fast so that I can hurry up and get ready and start my day. Like, there are some luxuries that we're unaccustomed to right now, and it's okay to relish that. It's okay to actually find the good in that. And it doesn't mean that we don't have appreciation for the people who are suffering. It doesn't mean that we don't have empathy for people who aren't as fortunate, but you're allowed to find some takeaways that you either wish to retain and or that you find really a useful luxury right now. So those are the thoughts that immediately come to my mind. I guess at this point, in the interest of time, I want to open it up to questions so that I'm sure I'm covering topics that matter to each of you. Those are some of the things that matter to me. So I guess, Carol, if you want to open up some questions, please do.
Sure. First of all, thank you. That was amazing and wonderful. And I see people clapping. Yes, because you really just hit the nail on so many things of what I know, things I was thinking, and I think other people also. So thank you for that. We have gotten some questions. I have one question from someone who's asking, how do you deal with job loss and loss of your medical insurance on top of everything else that's going on?
Let me start by saying that obviously, you know, the lack of security that not having a job and not having health insurance invites sends people through the roof with anxiety and depression and fear. And so my heart goes out to anyone that is in that experience. And I certainly have many, many people that are dear to me that are faced with, oh, my job's not essential and I no longer have it. And that's hurtful on a variety of different levels. But I think the palpable fear is, how am I going to get groceries? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? I mean, I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and before you can care about much else, you have to have the safety and security of shelter and food. And Carol and I were talking before this came on, and I know the Federation is offering some resources for people who are struggling right now with those very basic fundamental needs that we need for survival. You know, whether it's your organization or some of the community organizations, I think it really does start with as basic as, let's get some food, and let's make sure that you have a safe place. As far as health insurance goes, you know, right, obviously we all, you know, have to some degree an illusion of stability and security when it comes to health insurance and health benefits. And nobody wants to be faced with exorbitant medical bills in the event that they need to utilize the healthcare system. There are some forgiveness programs out there right now that I hope anybody and everybody that can partake in is doing so, whether it's payroll protection, whether if you're an independent contractor, you're taking advantage of the SBA loans and those kinds of things that may be available to people. As far as health insurance goes, if you show up as an emergency in a facility, they have to treat you, whether that's a psychiatric emergency or a physical emergency. And so if it's an imminent, immediate need, please seek care, whether you have health insurance or not. Longer term, I think that there's going to be a response required with you when you look here in Central Florida, even just at the magnitude of people in the tourism industry, with Disney, you know, furloughing all their people, some of the major employers making dramatic changes like that right now. A lot of people are going to be in that same boat without health benefits, without basic fundamental needs. My prayer would be that any of us that are able would participate in the solution when it comes to helping those. I know for me, in my sphere, in my circle, I'm trying to help anybody I know that I can help, whether it's offering a meal. You know, I think it's really, really good for those of us that you know, want to live, you know, helping and serving, that if there's somebody that I can make a difference, even if it's a tiny little difference of buying them groceries today or giving them a meal today, or, you know, people that have, service people that are in industries that are not essential right now. If you know that you're going to utilize that person as soon as this lockdown is over, prepay them, help them, because that will be the difference between them getting groceries or not this month. Most people do not have the ability to go long periods of time without income. And I think that's, it's not unique to you, and it's very, very humbling, and it's very, very scary. And if you're a person that struggles with asking for help, feeling embarrassed, feeling ashamed about needing to ask for help, I would invite you to consider asking anyone you know to assist you right now, recognizing that as soon as you are back on track and able to do for others, you will return the favor in kind. That classic pay it forward. If you can pay it forward right now because you're in a better situation than some of the people that are nearest and dearest to you, do it. Because who knows when and if you'll ever need that same in kind. And so for the person who asked that question, when we're finished this, please reach out to Carol and the folks at the Federation. I believe that there's a link, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, where people in need of services can click.
Yes.
Also, people who wish to offer to help can sign up for that list as well.
Thank you for that. Yes, we are really working to help people. We have already. We've purchased groceries for people and delivered it to their homes, and we would love to do more of that. So we, shamelessly, it's not about for Federation, it's only to help feed people that we're asking for donations for that one instance. It's all on our website. Great. So thank you for mentioning that. I do have another question. Somebody has written that they can't visit their spouse who's in a memory care place, and obviously the person doesn't even understand what's going on, and they just feel so disconnected. I've also gotten some other questions with a similar, someone with a parent who's undergoing chemo, but they can't be with them. I think it's, a lack of being able to be with a loved one at this time that needs help, and maybe how to deal with that.
Yeah. My heart goes out to anyone in that situation. It is extraordinarily brutal to not be able to offer nurturing and comfort and live touch time and talk time with individuals that we wish to be with. If there is a way to accomplish some sort of voice connection, whether that is a phone in that individual's room where you get a caregiver to hold the phone to that person's ear, if they're able to use a cell phone and you can, whether they know how to navigate FaceTime or not really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be FaceTime, but there is something extraordinarily comforting about hearing a voice, especially a voice that is familiar to that individual. And so, even folks, and I've dealt with some of my clients who have family members on respirators, and needless to say, they can't speak when they're on a respirator. But I've worked it out, or we've worked it out, where we've used things like Alexa. We've used things like, somebody else that works within that facility holding a phone near them so that they can talk, recognizing that it's not a dialogue that it can occur right now. Many people have offered that hearing is the last sense that ever leaves us. And so let them hear your voice if there is a way to have that be so. For those of you who can visit memory care facilities and or nursing homes or hospitals, I know quite a few people, especially yesterday and on Passover, visited and held signs that were able to have that individual come to the window if they're mobile and able to do so. It's heartbreaking to not be able to talk to the people we love, let alone touch them and hug them and kiss them. I think that's one of the things that I find most awkward right now, even for individuals who aren't sick. I'm a hugger and I'm used to touching, and it doesn't come natural or easy for me to kind of keep my hands to myself. And so, that feels socially awkward, and actually in my culture, it feels rude. And so I'm having to adjust to that. Obviously, I keep in mind, I want to keep others safe, and it's my duty to protect them and not expose them unnecessarily. My daughter and I have this thing where I literally, if she's laying down, I hug her leg because I can't expose her, and I don't know what type of exposure I've had throughout the day. I'm not going to guess about that. I'm always going to err on the safe side. And so that's our equivalent right now of a hug. Can't wait to really hug her. But that's not happening for a while. And so, for those of you that have loved ones in a facility, any way with which you can get a voice to them, if it's an old-fashioned way of a tape recorder, where you tape record your voice and you send it to them, and it's mail that they receive with a recorder, you know, with instructions for somebody that is caregiving to them in that facility. I work with and help a lot of caregivers as well, and they're happy to accommodate that when they can, recognizing that that makes such a difference in that person's world. I don't know if anybody has any other ideas, feel free to pipe in.
In the meantime, I do have another question about people wanted to know, with the children coming to mind, what are some warning signs perhaps we should be looking for if things are getting too much for their children? I would assume that are living at home because they're with them all the time.
You know, I think that really depends on the age of the children in terms of how that will manifest. I often use an expression that kids show us with their behavior rather than their words what it is they need. And so, you know, behavior is probably your best cue. And what I would say about that is if it's incongruent or uncharacteristic behavior on their part, as you know them and you know them better than anybody, then that would be something to be mindful of and pay attention to and check in with. Depending upon the age of the child, how much or how little you expose them to also matters in an age appropriate kind of way. Honestly, it would be impossible for even the youngest of children to not have some clue that something's going on in our world that's very different and very strange, because they're not accustomed to seeing people with masks. They're not accustomed to all the precautions that we're taking at home. And so wherever you can explain it to children in an age appropriate way, please do so. I think people make the mistake of not wanting the kids to know. And when I say age appropriate, obviously you don't want them to be frightened unnecessarily, even though it is frightening. And so you try to give them some guidance as to why we're doing what we're doing. Because I think they do better when they have an explanation. If it's left unspoken and it's just silent, remember that the energy that they're feeling from you is palpable, and they're going to take their cue from you. And so if they're experiencing you as stressed or you as worried, you better believe they're feeling that. Even if you're not saying it, you know, it's like we talked about earlier tonight, if you're saying you're fine and you're really not, and they feel that you're not, they know that. And so it's okay to say, Mommy's feeling really stressed today. I'm having a hard time today, or I'm worried today. And so let's say some prayers, or let's listen to some good music, or let's take a walk because I'll feel better. I know we already walked today, but let's walk again. It's okay to do that. If they're showing incongruent behavior or uncharacteristic behavior, check in with them. If they don't want to talk about it, offer them some of the same tools that I'm offering you about writing about it. And if they don't want to share with you, is there somebody else they would like to speak to? Offer them that as well without personalizing it, because sometimes they don't want to share with mom or dad because they're afraid you'll get worried. And then they have to worry about worrying you. And so it's okay to say, well, if you don't want to talk to mommy, then who would you like to talk to? Is there somebody else that would be comforting? And whoever it is they identify, hook them up, invite them to talk to that individual, or several individuals, or don't let it be such that you're the only person that they can share what it is they're thinking and feeling. If it starts manifesting in terms of not sleeping, not eating, you know, some of those more palpable, you know, psychomotor and physical responses, then it may require more intervention on your part. If there's some regression going on in terms of feeling afraid at night, you know, feeling afraid of the dark, not wanting to stay in their bed, regression is pretty normal right now. It's like I talked about for us adults that, you know, we too resort to old familiar destructive patterns under stress. Well, so do they. And so if they're, you know, they used to do this or that on their own or independently, but they're needing more reassurance right now, sometimes it's hard to be patient with that, with those demands, but it's pretty normal.
Okay. And I guess a little bit related to that, someone was asking also about their child, if they already have anxiety, but how do you explain to them why they can't even see their friends? And how do you know if they're at a point where they need some type of medication, since it's hard to go see doctors right now?
Right. I'll start with the friends piece, that if there's a way that you can make available to them seeing their friends, whether it's FaceTime or Zoom or any number of the other, tech apps that are out there, please do so. Because that's a huge piece that I'm hearing from kids right now, that, school obviously is about academic learning, but it's as much about social connectedness. And when they're at home, they're not, that's a huge missing piece in their world. And if we all think back to the times that we were of school age, or middle school or high school, elementary, whatever the case might be, our friends matter. And that was oftentimes the best part of the day, is what you got to do at recess or what you got to do at lunch with your friends. That's all missing for them right now. And so making available, I just had some preschool girls that I work with do a virtual sleepover, because they were so bummed out that they couldn't get together. And, there were mixed reviews on which parents were okay with them doing an actual sleepover and which weren't. And that was kind of polarizing the peer group. And I just said, why don't you just figure it out that you're all at your own houses and you do a sleepover, and hey, moms and dads, let them stay up late. Who cares if they're tired tomorrow? Let them do till 1, 2 in the morning where they're on the phone and on FaceTime. Normally you would take their screens away, but it's a Friday night, and they would normally be doing a sleepover at each other's houses, and they would normally be staying up till 2, 3 in the morning watching shows. Let them do that, and they can all watch a show on their computer together. So wherever you can be,
I want to do that
like that, please do.
Yeah.
The other part of that, as far as when do you know whether they need help, and actually to see somebody to get help, I look at palpable signs like eating, sleeping, obviously, when I say inability to function, not willing to cooperate, not willing to follow through, distracted or preoccupied in a way where they cannot focus and concentrate. Those types of palpable signs probably do require intervention. Now, I have many, many peers and colleagues in the field of psychiatry. I've been in this field for 40 years. All of us are doing telesessions. All of us are doing Zoom. Many of us are seeing patients in our offices. And so, resource amongst everybody, and at least, phone is better than nothing. FaceTime is better than nothing. I certainly always prefer to see a person in person, but if that's not available, you still can resource and find people that will intervene. Some simple techniques, breathing exercises, as basic as that might sound, are beautiful ways, because you want to empower your child to deal with their anxiety. And especially if they're a person that previously suffers with anxiety, recognize that they're going to feel it times 10 compared to the general population who also feels anxiety right now. And so what are those tools and skills that you've already learned about how to manage anxiety? When anxiety rears its ugly head, what do you do with it? You breathe your way through it, you move your way through it, you talk your way through it. And they sound so basic and so elementary, but it's those things that, sometimes it's, hey, I need you to breathe with me right now because I'm having a hard time and my heart's racing and I feel like I can't breathe. And when you're having anxiety, it feels like it's never ever going to go away. And so nothing wrong with saying, come on, I'm going to do some breathing exercises with you right now. I think Renee's going to probably touch on some of that next week when she talks, where she'll teach you some actual breathing exercises to do with your kids. And when all else fails, get moving physically. And I mean that sincerely, like walking, running, biking, swimming, I don't care what. If you move, it gives you a good dose of neurotransmitters, and it also kind of turns the valve on the pressure cooker of that type of anxiety.
Good information. I have one last question. This one came to us before the session, so I think you might have addressed some of this, but I don't want the person to think I wasn't reading it.
Okay.
Big fears of not knowing what is the best way to stay safe when you have to go out, since there's so many conflicting messages being given, and how to avoid panic attacks, anxiety when going out or staying in, how to cope and help others cope with the unknowns of the whole situation.
Yeah. I wish I had a crystal ball to answer that in a very definitive, confident way. I think for me, it really boils down to good common sense. And the first thing in a common sense way would be to seriously limit your exposure. That's why we're doing a lockdown. That's why we're doing social distance. And so whenever possible, limiting your exposure and minimizing the frequency of your trips would be the most common sense thing. So for instance, if you need groceries, all of you don't need to go. One of you can go, and or two, if you need some assistance with that collection. Have your list, be very deliberate and intentional about what it is you're going to get. I think a lot of the stores have finally, at least I observed over this past weekend, that everybody's gotten better with having marks and having spots and having 6 feet distance. Some of the grocery stores have enacted one-way traffic through their stores so that there's not bumping into people. Obviously, I look at it almost like when you're a new driver, you learn to be a defensive driver first, because you cannot control the actions of others, but you can control the actions of yourself. And so looking around and being aware of your environment, being aware of the people that you encounter. If you're out on a walk, even for exercise, it doesn't have to be a power struggle about who moves to the right or who moves to the left. Move if you're uncomfortable with the distance that that person is not affording you. I take my dog out a couple of times a day, and I am the first one to go into the street with the dog, obviously making sure there's no cars coming. But do what you need to do to keep a distance around you, a radius around you that feels comfortable for you. For the mask thing, I know that there's all kinds of conflicting data. About a month and a half ago, I ordered masks anticipating that what was already happening in other parts of the world was going to migrate here. I still have not received my shipments, even as a healthcare provider. And so we improvised, and I have beautiful decorative scarves that I love wearing. I'm using that as a mask. I'm using cloth masks when I go out and about in public, whether it's me being a carrier that I don't know that I am, or whether it's other people. I'm not allowing people the luxury of coughing or sneezing on me. And that really is just being aware of your body space and others. Those are the common sense things that you can do to keep yourself safe. And if you can't get your hands on a surgical mask or one of the more advanced masks, you can still provide a barrier for yourself over your nose and mouth. And that's just good common sense. Whether it's giving or receiving, at least it's a barrier. Is it foolproof? No. Is it 100% certain that you won't get the illness? No, but it's an added protection that can give you some reassurance. As far as panic attacks go, breathing your way through those exercises that I'm talking about is the best that I can offer you. For me, it's really surreal to go out and see empty parking lots. I had to run an errand on Friday down to Park Avenue in Winter Park, and I couldn't believe it's the first time I've been down there because I just have not had time. And it was surreal to see the streets completely empty of cars. It feels like you're in the twilight zone. And so part of it is allowing yourself the feelings when you see visual stimuli like that. Like I said with the Bocelli, it's giving yourself permission that no kidding, I'm going to react to this, and allowing yourself a pause to feel what it is you're feeling when you have a visual prompt that is unbelievable. I have had no reason to head down to the mall, but I'm sure I would feel that way if I looked at an empty mall parking lot. Also, when I look at businesses and parking lots that are completely empty, I immediately go to, oh my gosh, all the people that impacts and all the people that are affected, and how those people would be so grateful to get up and show up for the day-to-day and do something productive. And so if you can't do the normal things that you would do that are productive, do something else that is productive for someone else, even if it's for your next door neighbor, that you wouldn't otherwise, do something for. If I'm picking up something and I know that somebody else I know could utilize a roll of paper towels, I'm getting an extra one when I'm going. So it's things like that help you feel like you're of service to others, because one of the best ways to get out of our own uncomfortable, dark feeling state is to be of service to others. In fact, it's the best way I know, because then you feel a sense of a valuable contribution, which to me, that's the thing that makes isolation so difficult for people. Is we all do better when we have something productive to do, where we feel like we're making a valuable contribution and you feel like what you're doing makes a difference. And so being as creative as you can be with making a difference in people's lives right now will be good medicine for them and you.